Jesus gave his life a ransom yonder on Calvary, on Mount Calvary, cruel Calvary.
Praise be to God and Father of our Lord and of Jesus Christ. I welcome you to Encounter with the Truth here on Church of Christ TV. Islam Unveiled, Part 4. In this part, we want to talk about the scriptures of Islam. Islam, like Christianity and Judaism, is a religion of books. I didn't say book, books. It means there are so many books in Islam. Islam is founded on three major books. And these books are, number one, the Quran, number two, Hadith, then number three, Sirah. All these three books have been projected on the screen. There are a lot of information about these three books that we cannot cover in this lesson. But our purpose is to equip your appetite so that you will have a desire to search these books for yourself, for you to know more about Islam and how, as a Christian, you can engage the Muslims with the gospel. Let's start with the Quran. What is the Quran? The word Quran is not an English word. It is an Arabic word which means recite or read. Recitation or reading. That is the meaning of the Quran. The Quran is a collection of sayings that are alleged to have been given to Prophet Muhammad by Angel Gabriel or Jibril from God Almighty or Allah. The Quran were recited by Prophet Muhammad over a period of 23 years, starting from the year 610 AD when Muhammad claimed prophethood, up to the year 632 when Muhammad gave up his spirit or died. The Quran has 114 chapters. 114 chapters. And every chapter of the Quran is known as surah. This is projected on the screen, surah. And a verse is known as ayah. The word ayah means sign. We have two classifications of the surahs or the chapters of the Quran. We have chapters or surahs that were recited by Prophet Muhammad when he was in Mecca. And we have chapters or surahs that were recited by Muhammad when he was in Medina. The chapter that he recited when he was in Mecca are known as the Meccan surahs. And out of the 114 surahs or chapters in the Quran, 90 of them were recited by Muhammad when he was in Mecca and are known as the Meccan surahs. And the remaining 24 were also recited by Muhammad when he migrated from Mecca to Medina and are also known as the Medinan surahs. Every chapter or surah of the Quran has gotten its own unique name. For example, chapter 1 of the Quran is known as Surah Al-Fatiha. Chapter 2 is known as Surah Al-Baqarah. Chapter 3 is known as Surah Al-Imran. Chapter 4 is Surah Al-Nisa. Chapter 5 is Surah Al-Nisa. Chapter 10 is Surah Al-Yunus. Chapter 21 is Surah Al-Anbiya. So every chapter of the Quran has gotten its own name that you have to notice. Also, every chapter of the Quran begins with the phrase Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means in the name of Allah, most gracious and most merciful. Except chapter 9. Chapter 9 has gotten no Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And this is actually a debate among Muslim theologians as to why every chapter begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, but chapter 9 does not have that beginning phrase. The Quran has also gotten its longest chapter or surah and its shortest chapter or surah. The longest chapter of the Quran is Surah 2 or chapter 2, known as Surah Al-Baqarah, with 286 ayahs or verses. And the shortest chapter or surah is Surah Al-Kawthar. Surah Al-Kawthar, with that is Surah 108 with just 3 verses or ayats. And Muslim theologians are divided about the numbering system of the Quran. In all, we have about 6,000 verses or ayats of the Quran. But Muslim theologians are divided about how the verses of the Quran should be numbered. Some Muslim scholars count the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim that begins every chapter as part of the verse of the Quran. And some scholars also think that that shouldn't be part of the verse. So if you look at this Quran by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Mission, they have the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim as part of the verses. And if you look at the popular Yusuf Ali translation, of the Quran, they don't count the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim as part of the verses of the Quran. So in some Qurans, like the Ahmadiyya Muslim version or translation, it is one verse ahead of the Yusuf Ali. This is what you have to know. So you check some passages in the Quran and you will not see that passage there. Sometimes you have to go one step ahead to check whatever you want to check. So this is just for us to notice. Now, let's talk about translations of the Quran. Translation of the Quran. Like the Bible, the Quran has also gotten its longest chapter or surah and shortest chapter or surah. The longest chapter of the Quran is Surah 2. That is Surah Al-Baqarah with 286 ayats or verses. Then the shortest chapter or surah of the Quran is Surah Al-Kawthar or Surah 108 with just 3 verses or ayats. Now, let's talk about English translations of the Quran. Like the Bible, Muslims have also translated the Quran into so many languages. We have English, we have French, and other languages. And we have so many English translations of the Quran. We have what we call the Abdullah Yusuf Ali translation of the Holy Quran. Abdullah Yusuf Ali translation of the Quran. In fact, the Yusuf Ali translation is like the King James version of the Christian Bible. In fact, this is the most popular translation among Muslims or used by Muslims. We also have translation of the Quran by 2 great professors of University of Medina known as the Hilali Khan translation. Hilali Khan translation. This was also one of the popular translations among Muslims. This translation was done in Saudi Arabia by 2 great professors of University of Medina in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We also have a Quran translation known as the Sahih International. The Sahih International translation. The Sahih International translation. Then the Ahmadiyya Muslim Mission also have their own translation of the Quran, translated by Maulawi Shel Ali. This is the Ahmadi's translation of the Quran. And sometimes Muslims will tell you that, you see, unlike Christians with different versions of the Bible, each speaking different thing, we Muslims have just one Quran. My dear viewer, the Quran has gotten so many translational variants. So it is never true that every Quran that you have in a bookshop is just one Quran. Let me show you some of the translational variants that we have in the Quran. Surah 2, ayah 138. Surah 2, ayah 138. That is Quran chapter 2, verse 138. We are going to check what we have in the Yusuf Ali translation, what we have in the Hilali Khan translation, and what we have in the translation known as the Shakir translation. In the Yusuf Ali translation, this is how Surah 2, ayah 138 was translated. Our religion is the baptism of Allah. And who can baptize better than Allah? And it is He whom we worship. This is how Yusuf Ali translated Surah 2, ayah 138. Let's check what we have in the Hilali Khan translation. Our Sabqa, our religion, is the Sabqa or religion of Allah, Islam, and which Sabqa or religion can be better than Allah's, and we are his worshippers. So notice, in Yusuf Ali is about our baptism. Our religion is the baptism of Allah, but in the Hilali Khan, it is our religion is the religion of Allah. Two different things. Is it baptism of Allah or religion of Allah? Then in the Shakil translation, we also see, receive the baptism of Allah, and who is better than Allah in baptizing, and him do we serve. So each of these three translations are giving us different interpretation of the Arabic. Not just that, let me also show you Surah 3, Ayah 55. That is Quran chapter 3, verse 55. In the Yusuf Ali translation, this is what we are told. Behold, Allah said, "Oh Jesus, I will take you and raise you to myself." So in this passage, Allah said he will take Jesus and raise Jesus to himself. Let's check it. Let's find out what we have in the Hilali Khan translation. And remember, when Allah said, Isa, Jesus, I will make you sleep and raise you to myself. So in the Hilali Khan translation, it is not, I will take you and raise you. But in the Hilali Khan, it is, I will make you sleep. Allah will make Jesus sleep and raise Jesus to himself. It has changed the meaning completely. Then let's now read the Ahmadiyya translation by Maulawi Shel Ali. The Ahmadiyya translation have it as Surah 3, Ayah 56. Because the Ahmadis counts the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which begins every chapter as part of the verse of the Quran. So their translation is always one verse ahead of the Yusuf Ali and the Hilali Khan. So in Surah 3, Ayah 56, in the Ahmadiyya translation, it says, when Allah said, "Oh Jesus, I will cause thee to die a natural death, and will exalt thee to myself." So here, Allah is saying that he will make Jesus die a natural death. But in the Hilali Khan, Allah said, he will make Jesus sleep. Then in the Yusuf Ali, Allah said, I will take you and raise you to myself. Three different interpretation or translation of the Arabic text. So if we are Muslim, and you always accuse Christians of having different versions of the Bible, NIV, RSV, King James, and most of the passages are giving us different meaning, you also have the same thing with the Quran. So what are you going to do with these passages with variant interpretation among your translations? And these translations were not done by just common people. They were done by professors who have studied the Arabic language. Now, Muslims make so many wild claims about the Quran. And let me share with you 4 major claims of Muslims about the Quran. Claim number 1. Muslims say that the Quran has no contradiction. The Quran has no contradiction. And in fact, they will quote this passage of the Quran to buttress their claim. Surah 4, Ayah 82. This is what the Quran says. Do they not consider the Quran with care? Had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein much discrepancy. So here, the Quran is challenging that do they not consider the Quran with care? Had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein much discrepancy. It means if the Quran were to be written by any other person apart from God, there will be much contradiction or discrepancy. One thing Muslims always ignore is that this passage doesn't say there will be no contradiction. It says there will be no much contradiction. There will be no much contradiction in the Quran or discrepancy in the Quran. It didn't say there will be no contradiction. That is just by the way. The second claim that Muslims make about the Quran is that the Quran is eternal. In fact, the Quran was not created. The Quran was not created, unlike our Bible that were written by some human beings. That is their claim. And where do they quote or base this claim on? Surah 85, ayah 21 to 22. This is what it says. No, this is a glorious Quran, inscribed in a tablet preserved. So Muslims would say that the Quran is eternally preserved in a heavenly tablet in heaven. So the Quran was not created by any human being. The Quran is actually a nanzil. It was sent down, and it is also a wahi or inspiration from Allah Himself and no other person. The third world claim Muslims make about the Quran is that the Quran is perfectly preserved since the time of its revelation through Angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. Not even a jot of it has changed. Everything in the Quran is still like the original text. And where do they base this claim? What passage spells out this claim of the Quran or of the Muslims? We see this in Surah 15, ayah 9. Surah 15, ayah 9. This is what the Quran says. We have without doubt sent the message. That's the Quran. And we will assuredly guard it from corruption. So, the God of the Quran promised that they have sent the message, that's the Quran, and He will protect it or guard it from being corrupted by any other person. Then the last or the fourth claim that we normally hear from Muslims about the Quran is that everything in the Quran is verbatim from Allah. In fact, there is no word of Muhammad. There is no word of an angel or any prophet in the Quran. Everything in the Quran is direct from Allah. So most of the times, if you are studying the Muslim and you quote the Quran and you say, Muhammad said, the Muslim will tell you, Muhammad never spoke in the Quran. Everything in the Quran were given to him from Allah. So there is no words or speech of Muhammad in the Quran. We are promising you that all these claims are not true. And in our subsequent shows, we are going to produce evidences to debunk all these claims Muslims are making about the Quran from the scriptures themselves, from the Quran itself. Now, let's turn our attention to the second book of authority in Islam, that is the Hadith. The Hadith is the record of the sayings and the doings of Prophet Muhammad. The record of the sayings and the deeds or actions of Prophet Muhammad. And these sayings and deeds are known as the Sunnah. So in other words, the Hadith is the record of the Sunnah of the prophets. And according to Orthodox Muslims, there are 6 major Hadiths that are counted or considered as authentic collection of the record about Prophet Muhammad. And these 6 Hadiths are known as the Sihahu Sita. The Sihahu Sita. This is projected on the screen. Now, what are these 6 Hadiths? Number 1, we have what we call Sahih Bukhari. Sahih Bukhari. Then we have Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim. We have Sunan Abu Dawud. Sunan Abu Dawud. We have Sunan An-Nasai. Sunan An-Nasai. We have Sunan Ibn Majah. Sunan Ibn Majah. Then we have Jamaat Tirmidhi. Jamaat Tirmidhi. These 6 hadiths are known collectively as the Sihahu Sita, the authentic report about Prophet Muhammad. Now, the next thing that we need to ask ourselves is, when was this books compiled about Prophet Muhammad? Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632. And when were these reports about his life and sayings compiled? These books were written about 200 years after the death of Muhammad. And according to Muslims, these hadiths are commentary on the Quran. Before you can understand the Quran, you have to consult the hadiths. And these books that are now going to interpret the Quran to us were written many years after the death of the prophets. For example, Sahih Bukhari was written by a man known as Imam Bukhari. Sahih Bukhari was born in the year 810, and he died in the year 870. So look at the gap. Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632, and the hadith that is alleged to be a record of his sayings and deeds were written many years. The writer of the Sahih Bukhari hadith was born in the year 810, then he died in the year 870. So about almost 2 centuries after the death of Muhammad, that Sahih Bukhari, Imam Bukhari, or the writer of the Sahih Bukhari hadith, was born. Sahih Muslim was also written by Imam Muslim, who was also born in the year 821, and he died in the year 875. All these books were written many years after the death of Muhammad. Unlike the Christian Bible, that were written in the very century in which Jesus Christ lived and ministered. All the 27 books of the New Testament were written between AD 50 and AD 100. But the Hadith, which is one of the key scriptures of Islam, were written about 250 to 300 years after Muhammad. Just imagine. And Muslims are claiming that their scriptures are more authentic than the Christian scriptures. Let's now come to the third source of authority or book of authority in Islam, known as the Sirah. The Sirah, S-I-R-A, Sirah. The Sirah are also biographies about Prophet Muhammad. They provide the context and the environment in which Prophet Muhammad lived and carried out his prophetic career. And we have about 4 major Sirah literatures that complement the Quran in giving us the report and the ministry about Prophet Muhammad. The first Sirah literature that is most popular was written by a man known as Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq. And his Sirah literature is known as Sirat Rasulullah. Sirat Rasulullah. Ibn Ishaq was born in the year 704. Just imagine, 704. And he also died in the year 773. And the Sirat Rasulullah, or the life of the Prophet by Ibn Ishaq, is the first biography or the first report or account we have about Prophet Muhammad. And this book was written more than 100 years after the death of Muhammad. Just imagine. And even we don't have the original work of Ibn Ishaq, the Sirat Rasulullah that Ibn Ishaq wrote. We don't have the original copy. What we now have was the one that was revised and edited by a man known as Ibn Hisham. This Ibn Hisham also died in the year 834 AD, many years after Muhammad. And this is the source of all that we know about Muhammad, his father, his mother, history in Arabia at that time. This is the source of all that we know. And these books were written hundreds of years after Muhammad even left the world. The second notable Sirah literature is what we know as is what is called Kitab al-Tabakat al-Kabir, which means the book of the major classes, written by a man known as Ibn Sa'd. Ibn Sa'd also died around 845. 845. The next notable Syrian literature is known as History of Al-Tabari. History of Al-Tabari, written by or uttered by the man or the Islamic historian called Al-Tabari. Al-Tabari was born in the year 839 and he died in the year 923 AD. Then the fourth notable Syrian literature that we want to share with you here was also written by a man known as Al-Waqidi. That is History of Al-Waqidi. And Al-Waqidi also died around 823. 823. So these are the three major books of authority in Islam: the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sirah. And let me tell you this: without the Hadith and the Sirah, the Quran does not make sense. The Quran does not make sense. Why am I saying this? The Quran has no context. The Quran has no geography. The Quran has no chronology. The Quran mentions so many things that without the Hadith and the Sirah, Muslims can never implement it in their life. For example, the Quran commands Muslims to go to Hajj. But the question is, what should we do when we go to Hajj? You don't see this in the Quran. It is the Hadith that has to provide them the answers. The Quran commands Muslims to pray or to do salat. But what should I say when I'm doing the salat? The Quran doesn't mention. You have to come to the Hadith. The Quran mentions a lot of characters, of figures like Abraham, Isaac, Jesus, but doesn't provide any history about them, any context about them, where they lived, where they ministered. For you to get all this information, you have to come to the Hadith. So without the Hadith, the Quran makes no sense. My dear viewer, unlike the Christian Bible that has gotten its own context and history and geography, if you want to know about creation, you go to the book of Genesis. If you want to know about Jesus Christ, you come to the Gospels. If you want to know about the history of the Israelites, you go to the book of Kings and Chronicles. If you want to know about history of early Christianity, you go to the book of what? Acts. But we don't see the same thing in the Quran, and we don't see the same thing in the Quran. One notable fact that we want to share with you also about the Hadith is that Muslims have graded the Hadith according to levels of authenticity. They have the Hadith known as Hasan. They have Hadiths that are known as Sahih, that is sound. They have Hadiths that are known as Da'if, that is weak. And why do Muslims regard certain Hadiths as sound, good, and weak? They base this selection or grading on the content of the Hadith. So a Muslim will read the Hadith, and anything they see in the Hadith that portray Muhammad in a bad light, Muslims will say this Hadith is weak because it is not giving us a very good report about Prophet Muhammad. It is portraying Muhammad in a bad light. So any Hadith that records most of the atrocities of Prophet Muhammad, Muslims label that Hadith as Da'if. But Hadith that portray Muhammad as a good person, Muslims will portray that Hadith as authentic, Sahih or Hasan. But this treatment of the Hadith, this biased and selective treatment of the Hadith and the Sirah by the Muslims defies common sense and goes against one key principle in literature known as principle of embarrassment. And what does the principle of embarrassment state? It states that declaration made against interest is given high sense of credibility based on the assumption or because of the assumption that no one will speak against his interest. What it means is that since the Hadith literatures were written by Muslims, people who claim to be Muslims and followers of Prophet Muhammad, everything they wrote concerning Muhammad is authentic. Because being Muslims, they would never write anything that is not true about the prophets. So for Muslims themselves to write stories about Muhammad show that whatever they wrote should be accepted. You can't pick those that are good to you and reject those that are bad to you. That is not how we are to treat scriptures. That is not how we are to do objective studies. This is where time will allow us to draw the curtains for today's lesson. We know you have been blessed by this information, and it's our prayer that you are going to think deep about this fact that we have served you with, so that you can engage Muslims with the gospel.
Jesus gave his life a ransom yonder on Calvary, on Mount Calvary, cruel Calvary, paved the way by blood that we might win a bright shining crown. Praise his holy name, salvation has been brought down, oh glory, praise the